Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is the secret doctrine we are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the secret doctrine with tree, serpent, and crocodile worship. Object of horror or of adoration, men have for the serpent an implacable hatred, or prostrate themselves before its genius. Lie calls it, prudence claims it, envy carries it in its heart, and eloquence on its caduceus. In hell it arms the whip of the furies. In heaven eternity makes of it its symbol, de Chateaubriand. The Ophites asserted that there were several kinds of genii, from God to man, that the relative superiority of these was ruled by the degree of light that was accorded to each, and they maintained that the serpent had to be constantly called upon and to be thanked for the signal service it had rendered humanity. For it taught Adam that if he ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he would raise his being immensely by the learning and wisdom he could thus acquire. Such was the exoteric reason given. It is easy to see whence the primal idea of this dual, Janus-like character of the serpent, the good and the bad. This symbol is one of the most ancient, because the reptile preceded the bird, and the bird the mammal. Thence the belief, or rather the superstition, of the savage tribes, who think that the souls of their ancestors live under this form, and the general association of the serpent with the tree. Okay, we have several things to talk about already. First off, there are many different types of jinn, right? Whether you call it an angel, a demon, or an alien, or a jinn, it is basically the same thing. There's what I call the theory of spiritual evolution. This is my own thing. Take from it what you will. There are 7 steps to incarnated life, and incarnated is a very loose term. The first is the plane of existence. You are merely an existence. That is the level of the individualized atom, which is part of the greater Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is every single atom in existence, and all of the space between the atoms, and all of the space contained inside of the atoms. It is quite literally everything. But the first plane of existence is the individualized atoms, the little piece of helium and hydrogen and carbon floating around. The second stage of existence is the stage of plants. That is, you can exist and grow, but you can't really move where you want to go. The third stage of existence is the lower animals, which are the ones that act purely on instinct and cannot be trained in any fashion. They have the ability to go, it's hot right here, I'm going to go sit in the shade. I need a little bit of water, I'm going to go find some. But they can't really think. They don't have the capacity for training or anticipation in the way that the upper animals on the fourth plane of existence do. They have length, width, height, depth, and thought. It's not great thought, it's not deep thought, but it is the ability to be trained and to anticipate. My dogs know when it is time to eat. They know when it is time to go on the walk. They can anticipate these things even if they cannot plan a month in the future. The next plane of existence is us. That is the 5th plane of existence. We are here to experience things, and we have the capacity to understand thought. We can plan into the future. We have the capacity for time, which allows us to plan into the future. So that gives us length, width, height, thought, and time. That is 5 dimensions of existence that we live in. Next up is the 6th plane of existence. That is the level of the elementals and the disincorporated spirits. These are the simple more, right? They are disincorporated in the way that we think of them, but they are energetically manifested for a variety of purposes, whether it is a sylph or a nymph or a salamander or something along those natures. They have the capacity to see forward and backwards in time, but not really understand what they're looking at, merely to relay that they are looking at something. That is the sixth plane of existence. And the seventh plane of existence is the realm of the jinn, the angel, the demon, the alien, or however you want to term that particular plane of existence, right? There are entities, is what I call them, who are on that plane of existence, who are aligned with the betterment of mankind and the detriment of mankind. Half of them are here to help guide and lead you in the right direction, and the other half are here to challenge, help you learn, and to lead you in the other direction. I firmly believe that the entity who told Abram to go up and sacrifice his child was aligned with the detriment of mankind, and the one who stopped him from doing that was aligned with the betterment of mankind. They are classified the same because they are more than us. They have length, width, height. They can think. They can conceive of time, but they have a mastery of time. They can see forward and backwards in time and understand what that means. That makes them on a different plane of existence, the seventh. The eighth plane of existence is the divine. That is where we have come from and where we will return to. It is both the 0 and the 8, which is both symbols of infinity, right? The nothingness that we came from is a 0, and the infiniteness that we return to is the 8. And so those are the 8 planes of existence, of which we are on the 5th one. The jinn that he is talking about would be on the 7th plane of existence. And it can be good or bad, right? We do not really have the full capacity to discern which one we are dealing with, so you should be exceptionally careful when you deal with either one of them. The second thing to note is that macroevolution does not work. Microevolution does. Evolution within the species, perfectly acceptable. That we changed from one species to another, a lot less so, for a variety of reasons which we have talked about many times before. But here's a good one for you. There is no biological imperative for a human to lose a covering of fur, right? That was removing from us something that kept us protected from the elements, whether that was heat or cold. There is zero reason to lose a protective covering. Now, there can be some outside influence that causes something like that to happen. We could be intentionally created in the manner that we are, or there could be solar radiation that comes and mutates a patch of particular primates to cause a spontaneous mutation of the gene. That is possible. But just deciding one day, you know what? I'm going to go and pick the mate that is less equipped to be protected from the elements is not something that is going to happen naturally in nature, right? You're not going to pick the guy who has less fur, because the guy who has less fur is going to transfer that to your children, who would have less chance of survival. There are many reasons to doubt macroevolution. The microevolution, however, that's what allows us to be able to talk today. The small incremental changes within the species where we are building upon the knowledge that we have in order to create something better. Without that, we would never have invented the wheel or mastered fire, much less built glowing rocks that we can talk to and learn from. And so, that is 2 points of contention already, right? 1, the level of the jinn, and 2, the evolutionary thing. Now, the serpent is one of those things that can be taken either way. It is something that is assigned a value, right? We say, oh, the snakes are bad because they tempted people. Well, not so much, right? If God never intended for men to eat from the fruit of this tree, he would have never put the tree in the garden. And there are a lot of other reasons to doubt most of the things that are contained within Genesis as being a literal translation, right? It works on an esoteric level, kinda. If you stretch and pull in the exact right ways, you can make things fit into an esoteric framework. But as an allegory, it's fine. As literal, no, not even close. There are so many reasons to not believe that particular book, and I have talked about them with some extensive detail in the Unconventional Bible Study. There are 161 videos where we talk about that type of thing in much greater detail. So if you were interested in why, in particular, I don't believe in Christianity, that's a good place to start. There are a lot of reasons. But the temptation, right? The serpent represents more knowledge, right? That is, the tree was the ability to know that there is good and evil. That was what it conveyed, right? You ate from the tree, and now you know that there is good and evil. It was removing us from the fourth plane of existence of the higher animals into the fifth plane of existence, which is where we are now. And so it was absolutely necessary, and so I do not find it to be a sin. It is not the reason that we fell from perfection. We weren't perfect to begin with. We were created to be here exactly like we are. And so some of my unconventional beliefs. If any of that confused you, there are several playlists linked in the corner above. The legends about the various things it represents are numberless. But, as most of them are allegorical, they have now passed into the class of fables based on ignorance and dark superstition. For instance, when Philostratus narrates that the natives of India and Arabia fed on the heart and liver of serpents in order to learn the language of all the animals, the serpent being credited with that faculty, he certainly never meant his words to be accepted literally. As will be found more than once as we proceed, the serpent and dragon were the names given to the wise ones, the initiated adepts of olden times. It was their wisdom and their learning that were devoured or assimilated by their followers, whence the allegory. The Brothers of the Serpent is a good place to begin investigating that type of thing. When the Scandinavian Sigurd is fabled to have roasted the heart of Fafnir, the dragon, whom he had slain, becoming thereby the wisest of men, it meant the same thing. Sigurd had become learned in the runes and magical charms. He had received the word from an initiate of that name, or from a sorcerer, after which the latter died, as many do, after passing the word. Epiphanes lets out a secret of the Gnostics while trying to expose their heresies. The Gnostic Ophites, he said, had a reason for honoring the serpent. It was because he taught the primeval men the mysteries. Verily so, but they did not have Adam and Eve in the garden in their minds when teaching this dogma, but simply that which is stated above. The Nagas of the Hindu and Tibetan adepts were human Nagas, serpents, not reptiles. Moreover, the serpent has ever been the type of consecutive or serial rejuvenation of immortality and time. The numerous and extremely interesting readings, the interpretations and facts about serpent worship, given in the Natural Genesis, are very ingenious and scientifically correct. But they are far from covering the whole of the meanings implied. They divulge only the astronomical and physiological mysteries, with the addition of some cosmic phenomena. On the lowest plane of materiality, the serpent was, no doubt, the great mystery in the mysteries, and was, very likely, adopted as a type of feminine pubescence on account of its sloughing and self-renewal. Okay, if the snake is going to represent anything, it is going to be the masculine, right? It is quite literally a phallic symbol, right? The basest of them. Unless you have it in the circle of infinity, there is no way to even come to this conclusion. The fact that it changes its skin is not a feminine thing. Yes, women have the ovaries that shed the lining of the uterus. That's what it is. Drew a blank for some reason. And so they have a menstrual cycle. Okay. that is not analogous to shedding your skin of a snake. Right? That is not analogous to gaining new knowledge, which would be what that is. And so, while I don't necessarily take exception to that, it doesn't make as much sense. Right? If you're going to have the symbol of a snake, it is going to be phallic. Right? You cannot represent it as a snake without it at least pointing in a direction. Yes, it can do Y like this, and the curves are more feminine. Whatever. That is assigning an attribute to something that is not necessarily receptive of the attribute. And so you can say that the snake is feminine if you want to, right? We attribute Eve with eating the fruit, but again, that is not something to be taken literally. It was so, however, only with regard to the mysteries concerning terrestrial animal life, for as a symbol of reclothing and rebirth in the universal mysteries, its final phase, footnote, The Natural Genesis by Gerald Massey. Its final phase, or shall we say its incipient and culminating phases, they were not of this plane. They were generated in the pure realm of ideal light, and having accomplished the round of the whole cycle of adaptations and symbolism, the mysteries returned from whence they had come, into the essence of immaterial causality. They belong to the highest gnosis, and surely this could have never obtained its name and fame solely on account of its penetration into physiological and especially feminine functions. That is not in disagreement with what I was saying. And again, you can take the symbol as whatever you want. That's the problem with symbols. If I put a symbol on the wall, it means something to me. But if I do not record what exactly it meant to me, you can come along with a different interpretation of the symbol. That is an inherent problem with symbols. Now, all of these clubs, they hold the key. And by clubs, I mean the Masons, the Illuminati, and those various organizations up to and including the Catholic Church. They have assigned meanings to these different symbols, and they know what they mean, but to you, the uninitiated, they don't mean that. If, through the game of telephone, somebody who is initiated gets the wrong meaning somehow and relays that, then over time it is going to veer ever more and more away from the original meaning. Whenever we're dealing with symbolism, keep that in mind. And that is not to say that the interpretations that is being given is incorrect. It is just something that we need to pay attention to, that over time, meanings change, words change, what we attribute to these symbols change. And while we may believe that we have the end-all, be-all of what the symbology means, that doesn't mean that that is what they meant, right? It could have just meant, I really like snakes. That is a possibility. That is something that has happened, right? I know people who draw symbols and sickles and things all of the time, and none of them have an esoteric meaning. All of them are directly related to exactly what they look like. This is a snake. This is an eagle. It is a literal representation. Symbology is important, but always remember that you might be wrong in your interpretation of that symbology. And that includes me as well, right? I don't use a whole lot of symbols for that reason. If I do use a symbol, I will explain why I am using that symbol. Sorry. As a symbol, the serpent had as many aspects and occult meanings as the tree itself. The tree of life, with which it was emblematically and almost indissolubly connected. Whether viewed as a metaphysical or a physical symbol, the tree and serpent, jointly or separately, have never been so degraded by antiquity as they are now in this, our age of the breaking of idols, not for truth's sake, but to glorify the more gross matter. The revelations and interpretations in the rivers of life would have astounded the worshippers of the tree and serpent in the days of the archaic Chaldean and Egyptian wisdom, and even the early Saivas would have recoiled in horror at the theories and suggestions of the author of the said work. The notion of pain, night, and Inman that the cross or Tao is simply a copy of the male organs in a triadic form is radically false. See what I mean when I'm talking about symbols can change? I mean, just because it meant this does not mean that it will be interpreted as this. It is much better, in my opinion, to be clear. I understand the need for secrecy throughout history, but we are definitely not in that time now. Writes Mr. G. Massey, who proves what he says. But this is a statement that could be as justly applied to almost all the modern interpretations of ancient symbols. The Natural Genesis, a monumental work of research and thought, the most complete on that subject that has ever been published, covering as it does a wider field and explaining much more than all the symbologists who have hitherto written, does not yet go beyond the psychotheistic stage of ancient thought. Nor were pain, night, and Inman altogether wrong, except in entirely failing to see that their interpretations of the tree of life as the cross and phallus fitted the symbol and approximated it only on the lowest and last stage of the evolutionary development of the idea of the giver of life. It was the last and the grossest physical transformation of nature in animal, insect, bird, and even plant. For, Bayun, creative magnetism, in the form of the attraction of the contraries, or sexual polarization, acts in the constitution of reptile and bird as it does in that of man. Moreover, the modern symbologist and Orientalist, from first to last, being ignorant of the real mysteries revealed by occultism, can necessarily see but this last stage. If told that this mode of procreation, which the whole world of being has now in common on this earth, is but a passing phase, a physical means of furnishing the conditions to and producing the phenomena of life, which will alter with this and disappear with the next root race, they would laugh at such a superstitious and unscientific idea. But the most learned occultists assert this because they know it. The universe of living beings, of all those which procreate their species, is the living witness to the various modes of procreation in the evolution of animal and human species and races. And the naturalist ought to sense this truth intuitionally, even though he is yet unable to demonstrate it. And how could he, indeed, with the present modes of thought? The landmarks of the archaic history of the past are few and scarce, and those that men of science come across are mistaken for fingerposts of our little era. Even so-called universal history embraces but a tiny field in the almost boundless space of the unexplored regions of our latest fifth root race. Hence, every fresh signpost, every new glyph of the hoary past that is discovered, is added to the old stock of information, to be interpreted on the same lines of pre-existing conceptions, and without any reference to the special cycle of thought which that particular glyph may belong to. How can truth ever come to light if this method is never changed? Thus, in the beginning of their joint existence as a glyph of immortal being, the tree and serpent were divine imagery. Truly, the tree was reversed, and its roots were generated in heaven, and grew out of the rootless root of all being. Its trunk grew, developed, crossing the plains of Pleroma. It shot out crosswise its luxuriant branches, first on the plane of hardly differentiated matter, and then downward till they touched the terrestrial plane. And remember, this is all symbology just as well. This is not a fact. This is a speculation upon how something may have been. So bear that in mind, right? There is a propensity in our circle, and by our, I'm including me in the esoteric circle, to take these bits of knowledge and to take them as if they are absolute truth, right? Many different cultures believe in the tree of life. There are many good reasons to emulate that. We're not going to get into a whole tree of life lesson, although if you're interested in that type of thing, let me know and we will definitely deep dive that. But just bear in mind, once again, that it is subject to interpretation. It is subject to the problem with prophecy, which we talk about all of the time, right? You can only interpret prophecy in terms of things that you already understand. If you sat Isaiah down next to me, he could not understand any of this, right? He could understand that there were words that come out, but he couldn't understand this microphone recording them words. He couldn't understand this camera capturing me, even though he could see me on the monitor over here. He would not be able to understand this glowing rock that I am just receiving information from, right? But if you gave me a year and the language was not a barrier, he could come to understand everything. Just coming down and sitting here, if he was pulled in the spirit and he saw me and he had to go and explain it, it would be difficult for him. He would only be able to interpret it according to what he knows, right? There was a voice disembodied that came from this thing. There was an image of a man contained in a glowing rock. These are things that he would be able to interpret. He wouldn't be able to tell you about a computer and a microphone and a camera. Those concepts did not exist to him. That is the problem going back through history. Even if they did see things, it may not be interpreted correctly. See John the Revelator. And so that is just something that we need to keep in mind. Right? Many different peoples have the tree of life, and this is the explanation given by most of them. It may even be correct, but there is a possibility that it is entirely misconstrued. Don't just take it on faith, right? Test, prove. Thus, the Asvatthata, tree of life and being, whose destruction alone leads to immortality, is said in the Bhagavad Gita to grow its roots above and its branches below. The roots represent the supreme being or first cause, the Logos. But one has to go beyond those roots to unite oneself with Krishna, who, says Arjuna, is greater than Brahman, the first cause, the indestructible, that which is and that which is not, and what is beyond them. Right? To me, this quote, the indestructible, that which is not, and what is beyond them, is the representative of the Holy Spirit. Right? That is the terminology that I am comfortable with. It doesn't mean that it is the exactly correct phraseology. Krishna here is representing that. Right? It is, when we talked earlier about everything is the Holy Spirit, that is the same thing being said here. Its boughs are Hiranyagarbha, Brahma or Brahman, in his highest manifestations, said Suradhara and Madhusadana. I know I kill these names and it is not intentional, but I'm reading them. I've never heard them spoken out loud. Some of these, like Brahma, I have. Madhusadana, I have not. So I'm just doing my best. The highest Dayan Kohans or Devas. The Vedas are its leaves. He only who goes beyond the roots shall never return. An example, shall reincarnate no more during this age of Brahma. It is only when its pure boughs has touched the terrestrial mud of the Garden of Eden, of our Adamic race, that this tree got soiled by the contact and lost its pristine purity. Man, it is so amazing that we were able to touch something from God and corrupt it. That is wild, right? Like, I do not buy into the whole material plane is horrible, right? Oh, we live on the worst possible incarnation ever. That victim mentality that is so prevalent in this, right? Putting the blame upon someone else for things that you can take upon yourself as victim mentality. To say that this incarnation is absolutely evil, that we have to overcome this, that this is a prison and we are being punished by being here, all of those are not true. In my estimation, according to my beliefs, It is not true. We are here on a voluntary basis. We choose to be incarnated. It is not a punishment that is inflicted upon us because we said a bad word at some point or we weren't charitable enough, right? Those things are important. Controlling your tongue, that makes a difference, but not that big of one. Being charitable is an important thing, but not to the detriment of yourself. There is a balance to be struck. And so, just to keep in mind, once again, that the things that are said are not necessarily true, right? The perfection of the tree that is God being soiled by his creation that he intentionally created is a little bit wild for me, right? God put the tree there so Eve would eat the apple so that there would be the life that we have. It was not an evil thing, right? Then you can make the argument that disobeying was evil, but it's really not, right? God knew exactly what he was doing, and if he didn't, he wasn't God. It's really that simple. It's like when they were leaving Egypt, God was completely dumbstruck. Like, I never anticipated that the Israelis would be so rebellious. Like, he literally said that. No, it was beyond my ability to comprehend, says God. All right. The tree got soiled by the contact and lost its pristine purity, and that of the Serpent of Eternity, the heaven-born Logos, was finally degraded, because, you could degrade God. In days of old, of the divine dynasties on earth, the now dreaded reptile was regarded as the first beam of light that radiated from the abyss of divine mystery. Really. You have a record of the divine dynasties on earth. You have a record from the Anunnaki. You have a record from the people who lived in Lemuria. You have the records from Atlantis that tell you that in the days of old, of the divine dynasties on earth, the reptile was regarded as the first beam of light that radiated from the abyss of the divine. I want to see that source material. I want to see where that came from. I want to see the records of the Anunnaki. You have the records of the Anunnaki. That is what you were saying right here. In the days of old, this thing was truth. See, while I'm talking about the symbolism can be a problem, right? It serves a purpose, but if it is not clearly defined, there's a problem. And if you are intimating that it is truth when you are speculating, that is also a problem. This is a perfect example of that. You are saying that you have the record of divine dynasties by saying that this is what these people believed. You don't know that. We do not even have a club that goes back far enough to have a oral record of that. And so, yeah, right, the Rosicrucians and the Masons, that is probably from the 15th to 16th century. That is a very long time after the beginning of time. Back to the text. Various were the forms which it was made to assume, and numerous the natural symbols that adapted to it. We're just pausing on that for a second. And numerous the natural symbols adapted to it, as it crossed eons of time, as from infinite time itself, Kala, it fell into the space and time evolved out of human speculation. These forms were cosmic and astronomical, theistic and pantheistic, abstract and concrete. They became, in turn, the polar dragon and the southern cross, the Alpha Draconis of the pyramid, and the Hindu-Buddhist Dagon, dragon, which ever threatens, yet never swallows the sun during its eclipses. Till then, the tree remained evergreen, for it was sprinkled by the waters of life, the great dragon, ever divine, so long as it was kept within the precincts of the sidereal fields. But the tree grew, and its lower boughs touched, at last, the infernal regions, our earth. Then the great serpent, Nidhogg, who devours the corpses of the evildoers in the hall of misery, human life, so soon as they are plunged into Wurgelmere, the roaring cauldron of human passions, gnawed the world tree. The worms of materiality covered the once healthy and mighty roots, and are now ascending higher and higher along the trunk, while the Midgard snake, coiled at the bottom of the sea, encircles the earth, and, through its venomous breath, makes her powerless to defend herself. They are all seven-headed, the dragons and serpents of antiquity, one head for each race, and every head with 7 hairs on it, as the allegory has it. Once again, there is the human race. We have many different variations and flavors thereof, but we are all human, and so we are all from the same race. This is talking more about we are the 5th race, according to this, which would be the 5th plane of existence in the allegory that I use. The 4th race would have been the Anunnaki Lemurians that we were just talking about. So it's not necessarily talking about our skin tone divisions, but it is important to point out that we are all humans, right? We have many different varieties of human, but we are all human. And so that is an important thing to remember. One for each race, and every head with 7 hairs on it. Now, 7 is an important number, but it is only important that it includes the 8th or the beginning of the new, right? The harmonic scale goes from C to C, not from C to B. It includes the first step in the next harmonic. And so it is not 7, but rather 8. That is something that happens pretty much everything, right? It is the 7 including the extra, which is the divine. And so if there is one snake with 7 heads, that makes 8 parts, right? The 8th being the snake in its entirety. The head with 7 hairs upon it is going to be 7, where the head is the 8th, right? The 8 contains the 7. That is the allegory that I find repeated within all of these allegories that people take at face level. Now, for me, that is going to represent the 7 internal chakras and the 1 all-encompassing external chakra of your incorporation. You are held in place by magnetics, right? You have 7 different magnetic points. Starting from the bottom, it is base, sacral, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, crown, and the divine. That is the 7 into the 1, which would be the 8th, and that is a representative of 7 heads. It is a representative of 7 hairs. It is a representative of 7 sins and 7 virtues and 7 trials and 7 overcomings. It is 7 with the 8th involved. And so this representative for me is going to be different than it would be for her. I see the 8 in this. Some people don't, and that's fine, right? Symbology is subjective. But for me, I know that there are 7 internal chakras, right? There are more, but the 7 main ones govern the other ones, right? The ones in your hand are governed by your heart. The ones in your feet are governed by your base. There are other ones, and they are governed by other spots. And so the 7 primary with the 1 extra are how you have access to manifestation and changing your life and taking control of your health. All of those things from these 7. I know through revelation that these are true. Even then, you may have a different interpretation. Some people only find 5. Some people only find 3. Some people only find 1. To me, all of those are wrong, right? They are steps along the way, but you're missing pieces. You cannot complete the piece until you have all of the pieces. I'm here to try and fill in those pieces. So for me, anytime that we see the 7, it is going to mean 8. There is going to be the all-encompassing divine in all of these examples. So, back to the text. I, from Ananta, the serpent of eternity, which carries Vishnu through the Manvantara, from the original primordial Sisha, whose 7 heads become 1,000 heads, and the Puranic fancy, down to the 7-headed Akkadian serpent, This typifies the 7 principles throughout nature and man, the highest or middle head being the 7th. It is not of the Mosaic Jewish Sabbath that Philo speaks in his creation of the world, when saying that the world was completed according to the perfect nature in number 6. And once again, that is not going to be the perfect number for me, for the reasons that we just talked about. I understand that we have 7 days in the week. I get that. Even then, it is contained within the whole, so it's whatever. I'm not trying to change the day count, although 8 would probably fit a lot better for a variety of reasons. Just like I'm not here to try to change the zodiacal count, even though there are literally 13 of them and everybody just uses 12, right? And that's like literally in the band. And if you take the division by 28 days, then there are 13 divisions, right? All of that plays into the deception that is where we are. The perfect nature of number 6. 4. When that reason, nous, which is wholly in accordance with the number 7, has entered the soul, rather the living body, the number 6 is thus arrested, and all the mortal things which that number makes. And again, number 7 is the festival day of all the earth, the birthday of the world. I know not whether anyone would be able to celebrate the number 7 in adequate terms. The author of the Natural Genesis thinks that the septenary of stars seen in the Great Bear, the Septarches, and the 7-headed dragon furnished a visible origin for the symbolic 7 of time above. The goddess of the 7 stars, he adds, was the mother of time, as Kep, whence Kepti and Septi for the 2 times and number 7. So this is the star of the 7 by name, Sevict. Kronos, the son of the goddess, has the name of the 7 or 7th. So has Sephik Abu, who builds the house on high, as Wisdom, Sophia, built hers with 7 pillars. The primary chronotypes was 7, and thus the beginning of time in heaven is based on the number and the name of 7, on account of the starry demonstrators. These 7, and see, even that, right? The primary chronotypes were 7, and thus the beginning of time is based on the number and name of 7, on account of the starry demonstrators. You have the 7 divisions and the 8th all-encompassing universe, right? The 7 stars, as they turned round annually, kept pointing, as it were, with the forefinger of the right hand, and describing a circle in the upper and lower heaven. Footnote. For the same reason, the division of the principles in man into 7 are thus reckoned, as they describe the same circle in the human higher and lower nature. And once again, I am going to point out that there are 7 chakras, and that is a much better explanation for this. Right? The 7 contained in the circle of the 8th is us. Literally, 7 energetic points held together by the 8th. The number 7 naturally suggested a measure by 7, and that led to what may be termed sevening, and to the marking and mapping out of the circle in 7 corresponding divisions, which were assigned to the 7 great constellations. But there are more. Right? Like, that doesn't even work. Right there, that doesn't even work. You could go with 4, you could go with 8, you can go with 12. That kind of works, leaving out Orpheus. But you can't really go with 7 and make it work right. Right? It's just going to be divided wrong. Now, there were 7 visible planets, and that is where they got their divisions from. Right? One division being Mercury, one division being Venus, one division being Mars, one division being Jupiter. Like, each of the planets had a division and there were 7 visible ones. And so that is the reasoning why they use 7 for astrology. Right? That's the reason why they had these 7 divisions, and one of them appears low to the horizon, and the next one appears a little bit higher. That is the division of their houses. Right? That makes the difference. That is the division. It is because the 7 visible wandering planets were visible, and that is what they based their observations upon. The 7 great constellations. And again, that does not work for me. I'm about to start doing astrology, right? I cannot prove that there is no influence if I do not understand the underlyings. So we're going to deep dive astrology. It'll be my own work. And so it's going to be a little bit haphazard and hit and miss. But once again, there are 13 constellations across the band, right, where the sun rises in each one of them. And so I don't understand where you're even getting this 7 from. And thus was formed the celestial heptonymus of Egypt in the heavens. When the stellar heptonymus was broken up and divided into 4 quarters, it was multiplied by 4, and the 28 signs took the place of the primary 7 constellations. The lunar zodiac of 28 days being the registered result. Footnote 2. Thus, the septenary division is the oldest and preceded the fourfold division. It is the root of archaic classification. In the Chinese arrangement of the 4 sevens are given to 4 genii that preside over the 4 cardinal points. In Chinese Buddhism and Esotericism, the genii are represented by 4 dragons, the Maharajas of the stanzas. The 7 northern constellations make up the Black Warrior. The 7 eastern, Chinese autumn, constitute the White Tiger. The 7 southern are the Vermilion Bird, and the 7 western, called Vernal, are the Azure Dragon. Each of these 4 spirits presides over its heptonymus during 1 lunar week. The genitive of the first heptonymus, Typhon of the 7 stars, now took a lunar character. In this phase we find the goddess Sefek, whose name signifies number 7, is the feminine word, or logos, in place of the mother of time, who was the earlier word, as goddess of the 7 stars. Typology of time. The author shows that it was the goddess of the Great Bear and mother of time, who was in Egypt from the earliest times, the living word, and that Sevek Kronos, whose type was the crocodile dragon, the pre-planetary form of Saturn, was called her son and consort. He was her word logos. The above is quite plain, but it was not the knowledge of astronomy only that led the ancients to the process of sevening. The primal cause goes far deeper and will be explained in its place. I have a whole video that I am going to link up here called the Fundamental Harmonics of Life, I believe is what the whole title is, but it will be linked. It shows why 8 is actually a much better division than 7 for a variety of reasons. And so I'm going to quit hammering the 8. If you would like to understand the 8 a little bit better, it is definitely something worth looking into. The above quotations are no digressions. They are brought forward as showing A, the reason why a full initiate was called a dragon, a snake, a naga, and B, that our septenary division was used by the priest of the earliest dynasties in Egypt for the same reason and on the same basis as by us. This needs further elucidation, however. As already stated, that which Mr. G. Massey calls the 4 genii of the 4 cardinal points, and the Chinese, the Black Warrior, White Tiger, Vermilion, Bird, and Azure Dragon, is called in the secret books the 4 hidden dragons of wisdom, and the celestial nagas. Now, as shown, the 7-headed or septenary dragon logos has been, in course of time, split up, so to speak, into 4 heptonymic parts or 28 portions. Each lunar week has a distinct occult character in the lunar month. Each day of the 28 has its special characteristics, as each of the 12 constellations, whether separately or in combination with other signs, has an occult influence, either for good or for evil. This represents the sum of knowledge that men can acquire on this earth. Yet few are those who acquire it, and still fewer are the wise men who get to the root of knowledge, symbolized by the great root dragon, the spiritual logos of these visible signs. But those who do receive the name of dragons, and they are the arhats of the four truths of the 28 faculties, or attributes, and have always been so called. The Alexandrian Neoplatonists asserted that to become real Chaldees, or Magi, one had to master the science or knowledge of the periods of the 7 rectors of the world, in whom is all wisdom. In Proclus, in Timaeus, Book 1, Jamblicus is credited with another version, which does not, however, alter the meaning. He says that the Assyrians have not only preserved the records of 27 myriads of years, as Hipparchus says they have, but likewise of the whole apostasies and periods of the 7 rulers of the world. The legend of every nation and tribe, whether civilized or savage, point to the once universal belief in the great wisdom and cunning of the serpents. They are charmers. They hypnotize the bird with their eye, and man himself, very often, does not feel above their fascinating influence. Therefore, the symbol is a most fitting one. The crocodile is the Egyptian dragon. It was the dual symbol of heaven and earth, of sun and moon, and was made sacred, in consequence of its amphibious nature, to Osiris and Isis. According to Eusebius, the Egyptians represented the sun in a ship as its pilot, this ship being carried along by a crocodile to show the motion of the sun in the moist space. The crocodile was, moreover, the symbol of Egypt herself, the lower as being the more swampy of the 2 countries. The alchemists claim another interpretation. They say that the symbol of the sun in the ship on the ether of space meant that the hermetic matter is the principle, or basis, of gold, or again the philosophical sun, the water within which the crocodile is swimming, is that water or matter made of liquid. The ship herself, finally, representing the vessel of nature, in which the sun, or the sulfuric igneous principle, acts as a pilot. Because it is the sun which conducts the work by his action upon the moist, or mercury, the above is only for the alchemist. The serpent became the type and symbol of evil, and of the devil, only during the Middle Ages. The early Christians, besides the Ophite Gnostics, had their dual logos, the good and the bad serpent, the agathodemon and the cacodemon. This is demonstrated with the writings of Marcus Valentius and many others, and especially in Pistis Sophia, certainly a document of the earliest centuries of Christianity. On the marble sarcophagus of a tomb, discovered in 1852 near the Porta Pia, one sees the scene of the adoration of the Magi, or else, remarks the late C.W. King in The Gnostics, the prototype of that scene, the birth of the new sun. The mosaic floor exhibited a curious design which might have represented either A. Isis suckling the baby Harpocrates, or B. the Madonna nursing the infant Jesus. In the smaller sarcophagi that surrounded the larger one, 11 leaden plates rolled like scrolls were found, 3 of which have been deciphered. The contents of these ought to be regarded as final proof of a much vexed question, for they show that either the early Christians up to the 6th century were bona fide pagans, or that dogmatic Christianity was borrowed wholesale and passed in full to the Christian church, sun, tree, serpent, crocodile, and all. That is entirely likely. On the first is seen Anubis, holding out a scroll. At his feet are 2 female busts. Below all are 2 serpents entwined, a corpse swathed up like a mummy. In the second scroll is Anubis, holding out a cross, the sign of life. Under his feet lies the corpse encircled in the numerous folds of a huge serpent, the Agatheo demon, guardian of the deceased. In the third scroll, Anubis bears on his arm the outline of a complete Latin cross. At the god's foot is a rhomboid, the Egyptian egg of the world, towards which crawls a serpent coiled into a circle. Under the bust of the letter Omega, repeated 7 times in a line, reminding one of the names. Very remarkable also is the line of characters, apparently palmyrene, upon the legs of the first Anubis. As for the figure of the serpent, supposing these talismans to emanate not from the Isic, but from the newer Ophite creed, it may well stand for that true and perfect serpent, who leads forth the souls of all that put their trust in him out of the Egypt of the body and through the Red Sea of death into the land of promise, saving them on their way from the serpents of the wilderness, that is, from the rulers of the stars. Kings, Gnostics. And this true and perfect serpent is the 7-lettered God who is now credited with being Jehovah, and Jesus, one with him. To this 7-vowed God, the candidate for initiation is sent by Christos in the Pistis Sophia, a work earlier than St. John's Revelation, and evidently of the same school. The serpent of the 7 thunders uttered these 7 vowels. But seal up those things which the 7 thunders uttered, and write them not, says Revelation. Do ye seek after these mysteries? Inquires Jesus in Pistis Sophia. No mystery is more excellent than they, the 7 vowels, for they shall bring your souls into the light of lights. An example, true wisdom. Nothing, therefore, is more excellent than the mysteries which ye seek after, saving only the mystery of the 7 vowels and their 49 powers, and the numbers thereof. In India, it was the mystery of the 7 fires, and their 49 fires or aspects, or the members thereof, just the same. The 7 vowels are represented by the swastika signs on the crowns of the 7 heads of the serpent of eternity, in India, among esoteric Buddhists, in Egypt, in Chaldea, etc., etc., and among the initiates of every other country. It is on the 7 zones of the post-mortem ascent in the Hermetic writings that the mortal leaves on each one of his souls or principles. Until arrived on the plane above all zones, he remains as the great formless serpent of absolute wisdom, or the deity itself. The 7-headed serpent has more than one signification in the arcane teachings. It is the 7-headed Draco, each of whose heads is a star of the lesser bear, but it was also and preeminently the serpent of darkness, in example, inconceivable and incomprehensible, whose 7 heads were the 7 Logoi, the reflections of the one in the first manifested light, the universal Logos. And that is going to bring us to the end of our lesson on reptiles. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. I am trying to bring a little bit of clarity and a little bit of explanation on the things in which I know, as opposed to the things that I guess and I speculate. The 7 internal chakras you will not shake me from, right? I know that there are more, right? Your palms each have one. The soles of your feet have one. Your knees have one. But those are governed by the 7. The 7 being governed by the 8th, and the 8th being governed by the Spirit. And so you can move energy through those 7 points. That is an important thing. That is an important use for the number 7. But that 7 contains 8. Every example that I have found, you can make the rationalization for 8, and sometimes it is a rationalization, right? The 7 hairs being on the head and the head being the 8th. That's an extrapolation. That is speculation. Right? I'm free with pointing out my speculation because I don't know that I hold the absolute truth. But I do know that I hold at least a little truth. I hold at least a greater understanding than most people because I have used the things that I'm talking about. It's not something I speculate upon and think maybe this can happen in the future. It is something that I have quite literally used in my own life. I have healed myself using the things that I talk about. So the division of 8 is important to me. It is a fundamental part of what I do. And it seems to be rather rational. Once again, I point you to the fundamental harmonics. There are 8 divisions of most things. That is not ever going to be all things. But most of the things that can be taken in an esoteric nature can be divided better by 8 than by 7. And so it makes sense to me. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that I said. Drop it in the comments below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me discuss, as we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well, and we'll check it out. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.